and welcome back to The Single Cook. My name is Tiffany and I'm your host. Today we're going to be doing a round 2 recipe. This is going to be a pulled pork chili. So a couple of months ago my mom retired and she had a retirement party, and at that party we went to a barbecue joint and she had a ton of food left over, including almost an entire catering pan of pulled pork. And she insisted that I take some home with me. So I've had some sitting in my freezer for a while now, and I'm going to be using about half of what I had in the freezer to make this chili today so that I can make chili dogs tomorrow. So today we're going to be using that round 2 ingredient. I'm also going to be using a ton of other ingredients, and I'll go over that in the next clip. So let's get cooking. Okay, so let's talk ingredients. We have a ton of ingredients here. So the first thing I have is that pulled pork, and it's just in a freezer bag. And it's probably about a pound of pulled pork. I'm also going to be using about a half a pound of ground beef. And the way that I do my ground beef is I buy a big package of it, like a big value pack from Schnucks. And then I divide it up into half pound or 3/4 pound packets. And then I put them flat in a Ziploc and put them in the freezer. That way I don't have big round tubes or packages in my freezer taking up space. I can stack them, and they're much easier to defrost in like a bowl of hot water. It took literally like 2 minutes to defrost my ground beef this way. So I'm going to be using that. I have my garlic, because you all know I love my garlic. I have 2 cans of chili beans, a can of diced tomatoes, a can of diced tomatoes with green chilies. Our seasonings, I have salt, pepper, cumin, chili powder, garlic powder, onion powder, that mushroom rub that I love, and some ground paprika. We also have our veggies, our onions. I'm adding shredded carrots to this, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Mushrooms, celery, and then I have radish tops and spinach. And then I also have a little bit of flour here that I may or may not be using, and I'm going to top it with cheese, cheddar cheese. So the carrots, most people don't put carrots in their chili, but I actually like a little bit of sweetness, but I don't want to add sugar. And the easiest way for me to do that is to use a shredded carrot, because it will basically disappear as it cooks. So I won't have the texture of a carrot, but I'll still have that little bit of sweetness, and it puts a hidden vegetable in there. I like to hide vegetables even from myself. So if you're doing this for kids, that might be a good way to add vegetables as well. Same thing with the spinach and the radish tops. They just kind of disappear into it. It looks like a green seasoning, especially if you're cutting it up small enough. So I've just run my knife through it, and these will basically disappear as we go through the recipe. So even though it looks like a lot of greens, it wilts down to nothing. So a good way to hide vegetables is to do something like a chili or a soup. So let's get cooking. Okay, let's start by lighting my stove. Now most of you know that I have a wonky stove that I have to light by hand. I'm not sure why. We're going to be using our Dutch oven today. I am not making a single portion. I'm going to be making multiple portions. I am going to be using bacon grease to start off my pot. This way I do not have to use salt later on in the recipe. I can skip that altogether with the saltiness of the bacon grease. If you want to use vegetable oil, you totally can. That is what's listed in the recipe card, but I am not today. Next, we're going to get our ground hamburger. This is about a half a pound. And I'm going to just drop that in and get it browning in that bacon grease. Next, we're also going to add about 1/3 of a white onion. This is one that was a very large onion, and I diced it up. It's very hard to see with the lighting, but it's just a white onion diced up. And I'm going to take about half of what's there because I've already taken some from that container. And I'll save the rest for another recipe later. Next up, we're going to add our shredded carrots. This is about 1 medium carrot that's been shredded up. We're going to add our celery. This is about 1.5 stalks that's been diced up. And we have our 4 to 5 button mushrooms that have been sliced and diced. I am like my mother, and I put mushrooms in almost anything savory. And we're just going to break that up and get that hamburger browning. Mix everything together once it's broken up, and then we'll start getting it coated in that bacon grease so that all of those flavors can absorb that saltiness as well. We're going to cook for about 5 to 7 minutes. And after it's been cooking for that long, we're going to stir it up, make sure that everything is brown, that the onions are translucent, and the carrots have started to go soft. Now I'm going to add those radish tops and spinach. And it looks like a lot, but it's going to wilt down quick. Some of that is camera magic. I'm also going to add about 2 tablespoons of garlic. I'm going to use the flat of my knife just to pull that out of the jar. And we'll get that all stirred in, and that heat will start to work on the spinach and the radish tops. And after just a couple of minutes, it has already wilted down to nothing, or at least some of nothing. Next up, we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. We have diced tomatoes with green chilies, and I did not drain these. I have a can of just regular diced tomatoes. These are no salt added. Also not drained. And then I have 2 cans of Dakota's Pride mild chili beans. These already have seasoning on them, which means I don't have to put in nearly as much as I normally would because it already has some. But I am going to set the can off to the side because I'm going to make sure that I get all of that seasoning in a moment. So we'll do the second can. And I'm going to fill it up about halfway with water and just swirl it around as I add that water, and then I'll move it over to the other can to swirl it around in there to get as much of that seasoning out of the can as possible and add that straight to our pot. Okay, we're going to add that pulled pork. And some of this has been chunked up smaller, some of it has not. I'm not really paying attention to that too much because if I get a big chunk of pulled pork, I'm not going to be mad about it. Okay, let's add our seasonings. I'm starting off with a tablespoon measurement, and I'm going to be starting with the cumin. My tablespoon doesn't fit inside the container, but I can get a tablespoon there. And I'm realizing at this moment it's not going to fit in any of my containers, so I'm going to switch to the teaspoon measurement right about here. Now, if you don't know, there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, so I'm going to be adding 6 teaspoons, or 2 tablespoons of chili powder. So basic math. 3 teaspoons to the 2 tablespoons. Sorry, 3 teaspoons per tablespoon. Woo. Next, we're going to do a teaspoon of garlic powder. Teaspoon of onion powder. And even though I have garlic and onion in there, it still just adds a little bit more flavor to it. We're going to do a teaspoon of that mushroom rub, and this is from Ozark Forest. That is local to here in St. Louis. They have a booth down at Soulard that I love to go to. And for some reason, it's not coming out the way I want it to, but I eventually do get a teaspoon. There we go. And then I wanted to do a teaspoon of ground paprika, but I'm realizing right there that I do not have enough, so I'm just going to shake everything that is left in the pot. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of that coarse black pepper. Now I had the salt sitting out, but I'm not adding it because I opted to use that bacon grease instead of the oil. Give it all a stir and a good mixy mix. Make sure that all of those flavors get combined, that the beans and the tomatoes and the pork start to warm through. Try not to dump the pot all over the floor. And we're going to simmer on low for 1 hour, stirring it occasionally or until you get hungry. Once you hit that point, you're going to take the lid off of your pot. It'll look like there is a bunch of liquid sitting on top, but give it a stir to see exactly how much liquid is there. If it's too much liquid, you're going to add some flour to it. If it's just the right amount of liquid for you, serve it up at this point. It's not thick enough for me, so I'm going to be adding a couple of tablespoons of flour and then mixing that in to see how thick that makes it. And that flour will just absorb that liquid, but the heat that is still there will cook off that flour taste. And I opted to use the rest of that 1/4 cup of flour. I have a big pot, so that makes sense. And we're going to give that a couple of good stirs to make sure that that flour gets all incorporated and starts to absorb. And the longer that this sits on the heat, the more liquid that will absorb. So a couple of minutes later, I'm ready to serve up. I have my bowl, and I like to use my chili as a dip. So I'm going to put 1 spoon in, and then I'm going to top it with cheese. And this is just a shredded cheddar. To save money, you could absolutely shred your own cheese. I opted to go for convenience with the bag stuff. I'm going to add a 2nd spoon and more cheese on top. This way I don't end up eating all of the cheese first. The cheese ends up in the middle as well and continues through the whole bowl. So top with more of that shredded cheddar. And if you wanted to add other toppings or other cheese, you absolutely could at this point. A lot of people like diced onion on top or sliced jalapenos. You could really add anything that you'd like. I like to eat mine with the bite-sized round tortilla chips. And that is our bowl of chili. And that has been our round 2 recipe with the pulled pork chili. Thank you for cooking along with us. Thank you for coming through, watching our videos and seeing what we're doing here in my kitchen. So we used that pulled pork left over from my mom's retirement party from a couple months ago. It's been in the freezer for a while. And we used that to make a delicious chili. I like to use mine like a dip, so I tend to use tortilla chips to dip mine in rather than a spoon. So I like mine nice and thick and chunky rather than a little bit watery. If you want to change up any of the ingredients in this recipe, feel free. Make it your own. You can change it completely if you'd like. It would probably also benefit from a squirt of barbecue sauce, because my pulled pork did not have any sauce on it, but that may add a little bit of tang to it if you wanted to add that as well. So that's just another suggestion. There's a couple more suggestions on the recipe card at the end of the video, things like jalapenos or cayenne pepper or anything like that if you like it a little bit spicier. And if you don't like any of these vegetables, or if you are allergic to any of these vegetables, please feel free to leave them out and make it however you'd like to. But that has been my pulled pork chili recipe, a round 2 recipe. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe to the video so that we can keep making more content. And I will see you next time.